Well, hello, welcome back to Intermediate Writing or Intermediate Composition. Professor Kent Lee here. You have a midterm assignment involving proposals, and the actual midterm I will probably post very soon. Let me give you kind of an overview of the next lessons that will prepare you for this. Since I don't have anything in the book, I'm going to provide some extra materials, including on the website, and an extra handout. So, today we're going to talk a little bit about using sources for your proposal, and then next time, the next two video lectures, I'll go more into the particular system for citing those sources, documenting those sources. It's called the Chicago Manual of Style, and I'm going to talk about the Chicago footnote style before the midterm. Today I'll kind of show some examples, and next time I'll actually explain the Chicago style of citing sources, the footnote version of the Chicago style. And then probably, I think the Monday right before the midterm, instead of a video lecture, I'll have a kind of a video consultation session. I'll be in Zoom and ask you to come in and tell me what's going on. Tell me how it's going. Ask me questions. Let me give you some advice or some tips or suggestions for writing this. So I will make a Google document available with the one of the examples I'm going to talk about today, as well as some examples that are on the website. So there's the class website, and then there's a link to another site where I have some proposal samples, and I'll give you the link to that also. So for a proposal, for my class especially, since this is a writing class, you need to learn how to cite sources. And so proposals, especially more academic ones, definitely require sources. You need to cite sources in order to develop your case, to explain what you're doing. It gives some kind of evidence or support or rationale or reasons for what you're doing in your proposal. So, some kinds of sources. It could be academic research articles, what we call a sononmun, or a short research article that's published in an academic journal. Now, a lot of these, especially from an international journal, may be a bit hard for you to understand. You might have read some of these in some of your courses, in more advanced courses. If you can find one that's easy enough, then that would be fine. Something you can actually understand, where you can actually, credibly say you've actually read some of it and you understand it enough you can cite it in your paper. We haven't really talked about those much yet, so don't worry about that. More so, you're going to rely maybe on newspaper and magazine articles, but as long as it is a newspaper or magazine that has a good reputation for being professional quality, like maybe something that has a very good reputation for being a really quality magazine, a magazine on a specific area, a news magazine, a newspaper, either domestically within a particular country, or internationally, like New York Times, Time Magazine, and such, and also magazines from specific areas like business and business news magazines. We'll talk about later. Books. If you've read a good book that you can cite that's relevant, go ahead. These should be sources by experts. Again, if it's like a newspaper article, it should have some expertise. The magazine article, it should be written by somebody who knows what they're talking about. They have some professional level of knowledge, and that's more likely. Maybe you don't know the author, but if it's from a really good news outfit, a well-known magazine that's well-known and has a good reputation in the field, for example, Forbes for business news, Time Magazine for news, New York Times for news, the top newspapers or really top magazines in a particular field, should have some expertise. Now, when it comes to books, for example, you want somebody who's some kind of an expert. Maybe it's a professor, or maybe it's somebody who's like a business leader or political leader, but it should be not biased, not just their own views. But it should be somebody who is some kind of an expert. maybe a well-respected journalist, a business expert, somebody who's worked as a business executive or in the business world for many years and is an expert about what they're talking about, or a journalist who has a good reputation and is an expert on what they're writing about, because sometimes journalists write books about their area of expertise. It could be a more academic book by an expert, but that's written a more academic book, what we call a monograph. Monograph is a term for an academic book, usually by a professor on their particular area of research, and it probably kind of summarizes that area, the topic, and the different what we know about the topic and other research on the topic, and maybe the professor presents his or her own ideas in research as well. So a monograph. We'll talk about some more examples here as we go through some of the types of proposals. So for the proposal assignment, you've got several options. One is an academic research project, and anything is fine for this, any kind of academic topic. I'm open to anything. Chemistry, engineering, English literature, linguistics, history, whatever. I like all kinds of different topics. And I'll walk through an example that I came up with in a few minutes. For community service, you got a community service project. You propose a community service project, and you're going to maybe cite news magazine articles, newspaper articles about a particular problem in maybe a particular city or town or country. Maybe articles or research that highlight a particular social issue or problem or need that you're going to attempt to address with your community service project. It could be a news article about some similar or comparable community service program done elsewhere, and you want to do something kind of similar. Don't just copy it exactly, but kind of tailor it, make it unique to the community that you're trying to serve. If you've got a neat news magazine article about a community service project, that was done in some city in England, and you want to adapt it to a city in Thailand, a town in Thailand, well, adapt it, make it, change your proposal so that it's not exactly the same, not just a copy, but, related to the needs of that town in Thailand, for example. It could be research articles about a particular problem in a community or in a country. And of course, if it's about maybe a problem in a country you want to address, you're not going to propose a project to address the whole country, but maybe you're going to focus on one town or part of a city. And say, here's a social research, social welfare research about a problem in this country. Well, I'm going to focus on this town because that's, it's near where I live. Or this part of my city. I grew up in a nice part of this city, but there's this other area of town that I want to work on, I want to improve. So academic articles, news magazine articles, news articles about about a problem or about a possible solution that can be applied to maybe your unique situation. Could be academic research articles as well. It could be articles from maybe what we call a trade or professional publication. It's like not a typical magazine, but it's a magazine for people in a particular field or occupation, and it's by specialists in that field. The articles are written by specialists in the field, and it's written for other specialists in the field. For example, I have here, this is one for English teachers in Korea. This is kind of a trade publication, so it's not heavy academic research. It often summarizes other academic research that people have done and then says, this is how you'd apply it to teaching in a classroom. So it tends to cite up, refer to academic research, but this is written on a very intelligent level, but it's for other teachers. It's not like really heavy research stuff, it's research, but it's also kind of practical. This is for this is a professional publication, like for teachers. Here is one. This is published by a psychology research organization, an international one, and this is for people in a number of fields who need to know about what's going on in psychology research, counselors, educators, school administrators, people who do therapy, therapists, all kinds of people who maybe need to know kind of what's going on, what are the current trends in psychology research that's relevant to their career, their occupation. So you could find, maybe it's a teacher's trade publication that highlights a particular education problem or need in a particular community, and you could go with that, for example. This is going to be the basis of the rationale for your proposal. Business examples. Well, one is kind of like more of a business creation or entrepreneur or inventor kind of proposal. Depending on what you're doing, there are all kinds of sources you could cite. It could be maybe a trade publication or more of a specialized magazine. Okay, let's say you're doing something kind of technical engineering like. It could be like more of a magazine that's got a good reputation in the field of like technology news, tech IT news, and maybe it's about a particular, a good article that highlights a particular need. Like, okay, here's a need for, cybersecurity, computer security, IT security, and maybe you're going to come up with a proposal to address this specific problem or issue in IT security. It could be a business news magazine, a business news publication, Forbes, Business Weekly, the Wall Street Journal, something like that, or otherwise a really good news source like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. It could be something that talks about a particular market need, particular trends, in business. It could be something, maybe you want to just invent a new invention, a new product, and it could be some kind of article that explains the scientific basis or engineering basis of your invention, or it could be some kind of article about the potential market or market need, or just the potential need that consumers have. Here's something that consumers need, or here's something that companies need, or here's something that IT departments in companies need, and your proposal is going to address that. Some kind of new product or service or invention, business plan, business model, or something like that. Market research and news. There are a number of there are trade publications for different areas of business that you can look up. Magazines by specialists and experts in a particular field in business for other people, in that kind of business, in that kind of area of the economy. Could also include, market research and marketing news and such. Magazines like Harvard Business Review might look at Harvard Business Review. They have business research about all kinds of topics. Is something you could probably understand, whether it's how and why this particular company succeeded or failed, or this particular kind of market need or market research, or it could be case studies of particular companies and why they failed or succeeded. Employee motivation, articles about how to be a better manager, how to make employees happier, how to make employees more productive, how to be more productive if you're a manager or executive. All kinds of stuff are covered in those kinds of publications. Then the fourth option is more of a business proposal, a business relationship or agreement. You're, on behalf of one company, you're trying to make a proposal to another company to enter into some sort of an agreement or working relationship. Same thing again, there are all kinds of, a lot of the stuff that I mentioned before, news magazines, news sources, more specialized magazines, professional or trade publications for particular industries or particular areas of business. like trade publications for IT, technology, trade publications for people who work with sports industries, trade publications for people who work in education industries, not just teachers but education related companies, trade publications for people in particular fields like transportation fields, making transportation companies and such, airlines, etc., etc. There are all kinds of probably things you can find. Business news, articles about that somehow relate to maybe products, services, companies that are similar to what your proposal is about, or comparable products, services, businesses that can provide some kind of a rationale or basis for yours. Trade publications and such. So, for example, let's say you're, proposing whether it's like the more of the business creator option 3. I have an idea for solving this problem for companies with their IT security. Well, you'd maybe find some good magazine articles about that particular topic, a particular need or a particular problem or challenge in cybersecurity. Say, I'm going to propose a solution. Or the fourth option, more of the business agreement or business partnership option. Let's say our company has a solution to this kind of problem, and you approach another company and say, hey, let us help you. Here's what we can do for you. Here's some research about the kind of approach that we have in mind. Here's some research, or here's an idea for how this can happen. Research that discusses the problem, research that maybe discusses the solution, and our solution is kind of based on that, or research that shows that our kind of solution has worked in the past for these companies. Let us help you with it. Let me give you another example. In business, for example, there is something called business coaching, executive coaching, management coaching. So think of coach, a person who manages a sports team. They train the players and help the players to improve their performance. Well, in the business world and academic world, there's also something called coaching. So for professors, it's kind of a new trend in education for professors. A new professor who starts at a new job at a university, they're experts in their field, but especially if this professor just got his or her PhD and they don't have a lot of classroom teaching experience, and they're really busy their first 2 years at a new job at a university, they might need some assistance with classroom teaching. And so a lot of universities, especially in North America and Europe, will have these coaching centers, and maybe someone can just sit down with the professor and the professor can explain her problems, or they can videotape a typical class and then discuss it together, and the consultant is an education expert and isn't going to tell the professor what to do, but just talk to, okay, what's your problem here, what kind of problems you're having. So it's more like, think of a therapy session. A therapist doesn't tell you how to solve your life's problems. They're just there to help you talk through the problems, so the person can help the professor talk through the problems, and then maybe propose some solutions. The consultant, the education expert, knows about education research and then can suggest some things to the professor. You're very busy, your life is really hectic, as a new professor. Well, let me just give you some suggestions to make your classroom teaching easier and more effective for you and for the students. So in the business world, there's coaching also, and it might be somebody who has some kind of some background in psychology, applied psychology, or other fields, who's the consultant. And so this consulting company might be asked by a regular company. A company might ask a consultant or coaching company to provide some help. So it could be this company maybe has some problems, or they don't feel like they have problems, but they just want to improve things. Maybe there are some problems in the workplace, employee motivation, employees are not happy, They might have a consultant or coach come in and talk to employees and managers and kind of find out what's wrong, what can be improved to improve worker motivation, worker performance, how they feel. Or it could be more specific to the managers or even the executives. Let's say, guy got promoted from a manager position to an executive position. He was a great manager, really successful, but he's been promoted to an executive position, and suddenly he's having trouble. He seems to be having a lot of trouble in his new role, in his new position in the company. He's like, he knows this stuff, but he's having some problems as an executive for various reasons. So they might call in a coach and talk to the person and help to find out what's going on, what's wrong. This person just needs more training, or there's something with their management style that is especially not working at, now that he's an executive. So the coach will come in and maybe talk to the executive and talk to other executives and other managers that this person works with and figure out what's wrong. Or for all the executives, maybe they just want to improve the performance of the company at the top, so they might come in, call coach or coaches in to, kind of spend some time talking to the managers and executives and finding out if there are ways to just improve things, to improve their performance, the way that they work with each other, and such like that. So coaching. So you could, there's plenty of research literature and stuff, including business magazines, business research magazines, again, Harvard Business Review and things like that. That's something that you could understand. They sometimes deal with this kind of issue, coaching or worker motivation, how managers or executives can better motivate, the people that work for them, managing their lifestyle or time management and things like that. So you might make a proposal, involving like coaching services or consulting services, business consulting services. Here's how we can help your company. My consulting company or my coaching coaching team can help your company with these problems. And there's plenty of, again, published material, published articles out there on topics like coaching and consultation and such, and what kind of things work. Let me go back to the academic proposal example. I mentioned last time an idea for Roman influences on the Roman military history. So I actually wrote a sample proposal for you as an example, and I'll give you the link in the LMS. So I wrote this. I'll put it on the probably the website, the proposals example on the website, but I'll also share a Google Doc link, which is probably easier to read, especially certain parts of it. So I actually wrote a grant proposal as if I were a college student. This is fictional. I didn't actually major in history, but imagine I am a college student majoring in history and classics. Classic is like Latin and Greek, ancient, so the study of classical Latin and Greek civilizations and language and culture. And I'm interested in, this topic of how the Etruscan civilization, it's an ancient civilization that was in what's now Tuscany, Italy, Tuscany province of Italy, how the Etruscans influenced the Romans militarily. So I looked into this and I wrote a sample proposal. So I go into the background and I kind of explain the need. What's the need for this? So in your proposal, you need to kind of justify the need. No matter which kind of proposal you're doing, you need some kind of a rationale or need that you're addressing, probably. In this case, it's more of a scholarly need. There's a need for a better understanding of how, Etruscan military practices influenced the Roman military. And of course, I also begin by establishing my credentials. This is fictional, of course, so this is not me, but someone else applying. So this applicant knows Latin and other ancient languages and knows history and stuff. This person has a professor in the department who's going to be the advisor or director of this project, somebody in the classics department. Then the person starts to explain, okay, what's the need? What am I trying to solve? What's the problem that needs to be solved here? So you go into kind of what we call the literature review. That is, this is the more academic kind of proposal here, academic research proposal. I'm going into the literature and showing a need. So by literature, I mean past research that other scholars have done, research literature. And in this case, this is an undergraduate or college proposal. It's not going to be extremely detailed like what you're doing for, a master's or PhD program, of course. And I wrote a short example here, so it won't be too hard for you to understand. But I talk about, okay, here's what we know. We know the Etruscans had these kinds of influences, including certain kinds of military influences on the Romans, certain weapons, gladiator games, the way they divide their armies up into units, things like that. We know that. But what about some like more bigger issues? What about Roman military tactics, how they fight on the battlefield? Was that maybe influenced by their experiences fighting the Etruscans? Strategies, like their overall strategy in a war, was that influenced by the Etruscans? Either when they fought the Etruscans or the time when the Etruscans ruled over Rome? Did they get some of Etruscan kind of military strategies from that period, from that time? In kind of general military policy, their military policy. You think about today, the U.S. has its military policy. There's a problem sending the military. And obviously I'm not a fan of American military policy. It's using the military for the wrong things. Like what we did in Afghanistan. 20 years of incompetence there. Okay, Roman military policy, like how they use the military, what they use the military for, how they use the military to achieve maybe the nation's objectives, the government's bigger political and international objectives, how they use the military for that. Was that influenced by the Etruscans? So I'm looking at kind of more intangible, less physical influences, tactics, strategy, policy. So that's my research question here that I've developed. So I talk about what we do know, but here's some things that just aren't clear. When you look at the history literature, it's not really clear. It's not really spelled out. Maybe it's not very well researched. So I want to do this. And I want to provide some kind of rationale, implications, some why. Well, this would help us to better understand, just ancient Roman development, the way Rome developed into this big, powerful empire, and such. And I'm also going to try to do, the writer here is going to do something unique by connecting this with maybe modern theories in political science, modern political science theories about how nations influence each other, and how nations try to achieve their own objectives while they're competing with other nations. It's kind of a big thing in international studies. There's a couple of different theories about that. So this writer is going to do something unique by trying to use that kind of theoretical model, which is usually used for modern nations, modern history, and applied to ancient history, Rome and the Etruscans. Then I laid out the timeline. Here I'm going to do the project, and a brief explanation of the budget. For your proposal, you don't need a very detailed budget because I'm more interested in the overall proposal. The timeline, how I'm going to do things, the research methods, how I'm going to do it. And the concluding paragraph is kind of a conclusion. It's going to help us better understand early Roman history, and how maybe modern political science models can apply to ancient history to better understand ancient history. And this will also set the stage for my future research when I do a PhD in history. Okay. So the relevance, why is this interesting? Why is this cool? Why is this important? If you're doing, I don't want to say a community service project, again, your literature review is maybe going to be news articles, news magazine articles, maybe social work, social research articles about a particular need in a community or a region, and or articles about how similar problems have been dealt with elsewhere, comparable programs that can be applied to maybe the situation that you're doing. Again, for business model, for the options 3 and 4, either business ideas or business arrangements. You can cite examples of from news, business news, professional magazines that talk about a particular market trend, a particular need, or particular ways of solving particular problems, for example, that are kind of the basis for what you want to propose, or the inspiration for what you want to propose. Okay, so here's some articles that talk about this problem. It's a problem for businesses, for companies. Well, here's my idea. I want to propose my idea for this. Or here are articles showing how this kind of plan has helped save, these companies, or helped improve these companies' earnings. And well, let us do the same for you. We can do this for you. Something like that. So you can find articles that provide some kind of a basis for what you want to do. Okay, in the sample on military history, I've got some sources. I have used footnotes to cite sources. And I'll talk about these more next time in more detail. So in my lit review, I cited a couple of sources. This is a short lit review, just a couple of sources. Okay, this is what we do know about Etruscan influences on Rome, and I cite a couple of historical sources for that to show this is what we know. And maybe I should cite examples of history texts that don't really address the tactics and strategy and policy and such. That's something maybe I should do here in this example. Cite an example from maybe political science theories, political science frameworks, and such. But the sources cited show what we do know. Then I also point out, here's what we maybe don't know. And that's one way of providing kind of a rationale or objective for the proposal I want to do. So I'll provide this example. I'll give you a link to the Google Doc in the LMS. And I'll talk about the examples a little bit more next time. So if you have questions about this project, about this assignment, please send them to me. And maybe I can address them in the next video, or later video, or maybe in a Zoom consultation session right before the midterm exam week. So that's it for now. Next time, more about sources, citing sources, and using sources in proposal examples. So enjoy your homework, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.